My daughter looked me in the eye and told me I was worth more dead than alive. She didn't say it with a gun in her hand. She said it with a smile, sitting in my office wearing a coat that cost more than my first truck. They thought they had cornered a helpless old man. They thought I was just sawdust and memories. They were about to learn that wood can rot, but iron remembers everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how dust in my workshop wasn't merely dirt. It was the residue of 45 years of friction. It was a fine, suspended suspension of oak, pine, and mahogany that caught the afternoon light in columns of gold, hanging in the air like trapped spirits. To a stranger, it might have looked like a mess. To me, it looked like history. I stood at the workbench my father had built, a slab of maple 3 inches thick, scarred by 1,000 slips of the chisel. My thumb, rough as sandpaper, traced the grain of a half-finished rocking chair. I had been a structural engineer for 30 years before I retired to this shop. I understood the physics of things. I knew that every structure, whether it was a suspension bridge or a family, had a breaking point. You calculate the dead load, the live load, and the shear force. You pray the foundation holds. Today, the silence in the shop didn't feel peaceful. It felt pressurized. It was the heavy, static air that precedes a tornado, the drop in barometric pressure that makes your joints ache. I checked my watch. 2 p.m. They were late. Disrespect is a hairline fracture. It starts small, a missed appointment, a forgotten birthday, a text instead of a call. But under the microscope, those fractures grow. They propagate through the material until suddenly the steel snaps. I realized then, checking the second hand sweeping past the 12, that to them I didn't exist as a person. I was just an asset, a resource to be mined when the market turned against them. My eyes drifted to the corner of the office, a glass-walled enclosure within the larger warehouse. There sat the safe. It was an old iron beast, a Mosler from the turn of the century. The black paint was chipping, revealing the cold, unyielding steel beneath. To the town of West Creek, it was a relic, a prop in the background of eccentric old Arthur's retirement hobby. To me, it was a coffin for a secret I had been carrying for 3 years. Inside that safe, resting on a cold metal shelf, was a cashier's check. $6 million. It was the result of a gamble I'd made in the late 70s, purchasing desolate acres of scrubland in the West County that everyone said was useless. I had bought it for pennies, thinking I might build a cabin there one day. I never did. But 3 years ago, a tech giant decided that specific patch of dirt was the only suitable location for a massive server farm. They paid for the convenience. I hadn't told a soul, not my foreman, Miller, who had been with me for 2 decades, not the boys at the BFW hall where I drank cheap beer on Fridays, and certainly not Eliza. Secrets have mass. They exert gravity. This one felt heavy. Yes, but it also felt like a shield. As long as the money was a secret, I was just Arthur the Carpenter. If the secret got out, I would become something else entirely. A target. The sound cut through the holy silence of the workshop like a circular saw hitting a nail. It wasn't the throaty, honest growl of a work truck, the kind of engine that complains but does the job. This was a high-pitched, mechanical whine, a foreign engine screaming for attention, designed for asphalt, not gravel. I wiped my hands on my leather apron, the movement slow and deliberate. I walked to the bay doors, a silver sedan, low-slung and aerodynamic, looking more like a spaceship than a car, crunched over the gravel of my lot. It navigated the potholes with disdain. It looked ridiculous parked next to Miller's rusted Ford F-150. It looked like an invasion force of one. The driver's door didn't open immediately. I imagined the conversation happening inside. The last-minute strategy session. Stick to the script. Don't let him wander. Get the check. Eliza Distaper, she wore sunglasses that covered half her face, the lenses reflecting the distorted image of my shop. Her white trench coat was pristine, a stark contrast to the sawdust-laden air. She stepped carefully, placing her high heels on the stones as if the ground itself was unworthy of her soul. She looked at the workshop not with nostalgia, but with the clinical detachment of an appraiser. Sterling followed. My son-in-law. He adjusted a suit jacket that was cut too slim, the fabric straining across his shoulders. He looked around the lot, his nose wrinkling slightly. He was inspecting a teardown project, calculating the scrap value of the metal and the resale value of the land. He pulled out his phone, checking the notification, not even looking at me yet. "Daddy," Eliza called out. The voice was practiced. It was bright, airy, and pitched a full octave higher than her natural speaking voice. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. It was entirely hollow. "Hello, Eliza," I said. I stayed in the doorway, blocking the entrance with my body. I was the gatekeeper. "Sterling." "Arthur?" Sterling nodded, finally looking up. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It stopped at his teeth. "Good to see you. Place looks rustic." "It's a workshop, Sterling. It's meant to work, not pose," I said, my voice flat. "Come in. Coffee is on." He smirked, a small, dismissive twitch of the lips. He didn't respect the work. He didn't understand that the sawdust was the byproduct of creation. He only respected what the work could buy. Then tunt. Process was an inconvenience. Only the transaction mattered. We sat in my office. It was a small room, partitioned off from the main floor, smelling of old invoices, stale tobacco, and burnt coffee grounds. I poured them mugs of the black sludge I drank all day. It was motor oil thick. Eliza took a sip and grimaced, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. She set the mug down immediately, wiping her lip with a manicured finger as if she'd been poisoned. "So," I said, leaning back in my chair. The springs squeaked, a sharp, metallic protest. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You usually just text, or have your assistant email." Eliza exchanged a look with Sterling. I knew that look. I had seen it in boardrooms and on construction sites when contractors were about to explain why they were over budget. It was the signal, the "you start" look, the look of conspirators who had rehearsed their lines in the car, but were suddenly faltering under the glare of the lights. "We have news, Arthur," Sterling said, leaning forward. He clasped his hands together, elbows on his knees. He was trying to project power, but he just looked tense. "Big news. We're launching the fund, the Apex Horizon Fund." "Is that so?" I asked. I kept my face impassive. "It's going to revolutionize commercial real estate in the city," he continued, his hands moving fast now, chopping the air to emphasize his buzzwords. "Vertical integration, mixed-use ecosystems. We're poised to take over the skyline. We have the permits, the vision, the branding." "That sounds nice," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Good luck with it." The silence stretched. My lack of enthusiasm was a dampener they hadn't accounted for. "We don't need luck, Daddy," Eliza said, her voice tightening, losing that airy quality. "We need liquidity." There it was. The hook. The tension in the cable before the snap. "The buy-in for the founding partners is due next week," Sterling said. "We're a little short. Cash flow is tied up in assets. You know how it is." "How short?" I asked. I knew the answer would be a number that would make my stomach turn. I watched Sterling's throat bob as he swallowed. 500,000, Sterling said quickly, like pulling off a bandage. "A bridge loan, of course. We'll pay you back with interest in 6 months. Double the market rate. We've already drawn up the paperwork." I looked at them. I looked at Eliza's manicured nails, tapping nervously on the wooden armrest. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of a ticking clock. I looked at the sweat beading on Sterling's upper lip, despite the cool air of the shop. They weren't launching a fund. My engineer's intuition screamed at me. Structures don't vibrate like this, unless the foundation is failing. They were drowning. I could see the desperation radiating off them like heat waves off asphalt. "I don't have $500,000 lying around, Eliza," I lied. "I'm a retired carpenter. I live on a pension and what I make selling rocking chairs. Don't lie to me." Eliza snapped. The mask of the sweet daughter vanished instantly. Her face twisted into something ugly, something sharp and angular. "We know about the land sale, Dad. We know you sold the acres in the West County. It's public record." My heart skipped a beat, a palpable thump in my chest. I had forgotten about the county clerk. I had forgotten that in the digital age, privacy is a myth. Greed makes people very efficient researchers. They hadn't come to visit. They had come to collect on an asset they believed they already owned. "That money is for my retirement," I said, my voice hardening into concrete. And for the business. It's not for gambling on condos that haven't been built yet. It's not gambling, Sterling shouted, standing up. It's leverage. You're sitting on millions, Arthur, letting it rot in a bank account while your own flesh and blood is struggling. Struggling? Struggling? I gestured to the dusty window, through which the silver car gleamed. You drove here in a $100,000 car. You're wearing a watch that costs more than my foreman makes in 2 years. That's not struggling, Sterling. That's vanity. You're confusing needs with wants. You have no right to judge us. Eliza stood up, her face flushing a deep blotchy red. You owe us. Mom would have wanted you to help us. She wouldn't let us suffer like this. The air left the room. It was as if a vacuum had been engaged. Don't you bring your mother into this, I warned. My voice dropped to a low growl, a vibration deep in my chest. She worked double shifts at the diner, so you could have braces. She walked to work in the rain, so you could have dance lessons. She knew the value of $1. You've forgotten it. You've forgotten her. I haven't forgotten anything. Eliza screamed, her eyes wet with rage, not sorrow. I remember you being in this shop every weekend. I remember you loving your wood more than you loved us. I remember you missing my plays. You owe me for that neglect. You owe me? She didn't want my love. She wanted my guilt to pay her bills. She was trying to monetize my regret. We're not leaving until we get a check, Sterling said, crossing his arms. He moved between me and the door. We know you have the checkbook in that safe. We're staying right here. I looked at the old iron safe in the corner. It sat there, heavy and silent, judging us. Then you'll be waiting a long time, I said. Get out of my office. They didn't move. Sterling puffed his chest out. I stood up. I reached across the desk and picked up a heavy framing chisel. It was 2 pounds of cold steel with a razor-sharp edge. I didn't point it at them. I just held it, testing its weight, feeling the balance. Get out. Fear is a great motivator. It overrides greed. At least temporarily. Sterling looked at the chisel, then at my eyes. He saw something there that scared him more than his creditors. They scrambled, but as they retreated to the silver car, I knew this wasn't a victory. This was just the opening skirmish. I had reinforced the walls, but the siege had just begun. They didn't leave town. I expected a retreat, a regrouping in the city, perhaps a legal letter sent from a safe distance. I underestimated their desperation. They checked into the Oaken Inn, the only hotel in our small village, a faux Victorian structure that smelled of potpourri and damp carpet. They set up a command post in a suite, overlooking the main street. From there, they could see the bank, the diner, and the road leading to my shop. For the next 2 weeks, they launched a war against me. It wasn't a war of artillery or frontal assaults. It was a siege. It was a war of attrition, designed to locate the stress fractures in my life and hammer a wedge into them until I split. They wanted to wear me down, to induce material fatigue, but they forgot one thing. I work with hardwood. I know that oak doesn't bend easily. I know that to shape something durable, you have to apply pressure and heat, and if the grain is straight, it will endure. Day 3. The air was crisp, the sky a bruised purple of early morning. I went to lunch at Sallow's, the diner I'd eaten at for 30 years. It was a place of vinyl booths and laminate tables, where the menu hadn't changed since the Reagan administration. Usually Sal would greet me with a pot of coffee in hand, before the door even closed behind me. Today the bell above the door jingled, and the room went quiet. Not silent, but the hum of conversation dropped a decibel. Eyes darted away. Sal stood behind the counter, scrubbing a stain that wasn't there. He looked embarrassed, his shoulders hunched. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Afternoon, Sal, I said, taking my usual stool. Just the club sandwich today. Sal wiped his hands on a rag, looking at the floor. Arthur, he mumbled. About that? He slid a slip of green paper across the counter. A bill? Your daughter came in this morning, Sal said, his voice low, pained. She brought a friend, that husband of hers. They ordered the works, steak, eggs, a bottle of champagne they made me run down to the liquor store to buy because we don't stock it. Mimosas. I looked at the bill. $214. For breakfast, she said, to put it on your account. Sal continued, finally looking at me. His eyes were apologetic but firm. She said you approved it. Said it was a family celebration. I felt the heat rise up the back of my neck. It wasn't about the $200. It was the public claiming of my resources. It was a dog marking its territory. I didn't approve it, Sale, I said quietly. I figured, Sale sighed. But Art, she made a scene, loud, talking about how you're tight, how you're hoarding family money. I pulled out my wallet. My hands were shaking, just a slight tremor that I couldn't suppress. I laid $300 on the counter. Keep the change, Sal, but close the account, cash only from now on. She was spending my money to spit in my face. She was turning my sanctuary into a stage for her performance. As I was leaving, pushing past the heavy glass door, a hand touched my elbow. It was Sarah, the young waitress. She was new. Maybe 19, working double shifts to pay for community college. She had dark circles under her eyes and callus on her fingers. She reminded me of my wife at that age, tired but possessing a spine of steel. Mr. Halloway, she whispered. She looked back at the counter to make sure Sal wasn't watching. Yes, Sarah? Your daughter, and that man. I was refilling their water. She bit her lip, looking out at the parking lot. They were talking loud because they didn't think I mattered. Rich folks think waitresses are furniture. What did they say? They were talking about a lawyer, a doctor. She lowered her voice to a barely audible hiss. They said you're old. They said they need to find a way to make you unfit, to take power of attorney. They used the word incompetent a lot. My blood ran cold. The sensation was physical, like stepping into a freezer. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was a coup. They weren't trying to borrow money. They were trying to erase me. In engineering terms, they were looking for a catastrophic failure mode, a way to condemn the building so they could salvage the materials. Thank you, Sarah, I said. You didn't hear that. Hear what? She said, and turned back to her tables. I needed to check the perimeter. I drove straight to the local bank branch. It was a brick building with fake marble columns, trying to project stability. I asked for Elias Thorne. He was the branch manager. I'd known him since he was a teller with bad acne. We played poker on Thursday nights. I had helped him build his deck. Mr.
Holloway.
The receptionist said, Mr. Thorne is in a meeting. I'll wait, I said. I walked past her and opened his door. Elias was sitting at his desk, staring at a blank computer screen. When he saw me, he jumped. Arthur, he stammered. I was just... Who accessed my records, Elias? I sat in the plush guest chair. I didn't yell. I spoke with the calm precision of a man reading a blueprint. Elias wouldn't look at me. He kept tapping his pen on the mahogany desk. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous, erratic rhythm. Arthur, look. These things are complicated, not the balance. Elias. Not the general inquiry. Who accessed the exact liquidity? He stopped tapping. He looked small. He was sweating, damp patches, forming on his blue shirt. Her husband, Elias whispered. Sterling. He came in yesterday. He had someone on the phone. Someone from the corporate regional office.
And?
He threatened my pension, Arthur. Elias's voice cracked. He knew about the audit from '09. He said he'd have my job if I didn't confirm the funds were available. He said they were your power of attorney designates pending a medical review. And you believed him? I was scared, Art.
Agasuk.
I have 2 kids in college. The knife in my back had a familiar handle. It was carved from the wood of friendship. You broke privacy laws, Elias, I said, standing up. Please, he begged, don't report it. I won't report it, I said, walking to the door. But don't expect me at poker on Thursday. I went back to the shop. The sanctuary, but even here the air felt tainted. Miller, my foreman, was waiting. He was a big man, sawdust in his beard, hands like catcher's mitts. He was pacing by the table saw, a piece of sandpaper in his hand that he was twisting into a tight spiral. You know what that husband of hers is saying? Miller asked, not bothering with a greeting. Tell me he's down at the hardware store, holding court near the lumber aisle, telling folks, you're going senile, losing your grip. Miller spat on the floor, something he never did inside the shop. He's saying the business is going to be under new management by the end of the month, saying he's going to modernize operations. I walked over to my workbench. I picked up a block plane and adjusted the blade. He's poisoning the well, Miller. He's calling you crazy, boss. In front of the whole town. I gripped the plane so hard my knuckles turned white. I imagined planing down a piece of rough oak, shaving away the imperfections, until it was smooth. Let him talk, Miller. A lion doesn't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep. But inside I was burning. Reputation is the only currency a tradesman really has. If they think your hands are shaking, they won't hire you to frame their house. He was attacking my livelihood to force my hand. I drove home that evening. My house was a modest bungalow, set back from the road, surrounded by the pines I loved. A strange car was in my driveway, a generic gray sedan. A man in a cheap suit was waiting on my porch. He held a clipboard like a shield. "Mr. Holloway?" he asked. "I'm Dr. Evans. Your daughter contacted me. Did she?" I stopped at the bottom of the steps. The elevation difference gave him the height advantage, but I had the presence. "She's very concerned about your cognitive decline. She mentioned episodes of confusion, aggression. She asked me to perform a wellness check." He took a step down toward me. He had a soft face, the face of a man who dealt in paperwork and pills. "I'm fine," I said. "Sir, early onset dementia can be subtle. If you're confused, I can help. I know what day it is, doctor. I know the president. I know the square root of 14. And I know that you are trespassing. Mr. Holloway, refusal to cooperate can be seen as a symptom of—" "Get off my property," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with the threat of violence. "Before I show you how good my cognitive function is with a trespassing warrant. And Dr. Evans, if you write a single word on that clipboard that suggests I am anything other than sane, I will sue you for malpractice until your grandchildren are paying my legal fees." He blinked. He capped his pen. They were trying to construct a narrative, a cage made of lies and medical jargon. 2 days later, the escalation continued. A police cruiser rolled into the shop lot. The gravel crunched under the heavy tires. Detective Harrow stepped out. He was a big man, stern-faced, a man who followed the book even if the book was written in a language he didn't understand. "Arthur," he said. He didn't smile. "Detective, what can I do for you?" "We got a call, anonymous tip. Said there are unsafe working conditions here. Said you're storing volatile chemicals illegally. Said the wiring is a fire hazard." "That's garbage, Harrow. You know me. I wired this place myself. It's over-engineered. I have to investigate, Arthur." "Procedure." He walked past me. He started opening cabinets. He wasn't looking for chemicals. He was looking for an excuse. He found an old can of varnish on a high shelf. It was slightly rusted around the rim. "Improper storage," he said. He pulled out a pad. "And this breaker box looks old. Not up to current code. It's grandfathered in." I shouted, "It's perfectly safe. I'm putting a temporary hold on operations," Harrow said. He pulled a red sticker out of his pocket. "Stop work order." He slapped it on my bay door. The sound was like a gunshot. "Until a city inspector clears it. Could take a week. Maybe 2. You're shutting me down." "This is my livelihood, Harrow. Just following protocols, Arthur. Take it up with the city." He walked away. But I saw him check his phone as he got in the car. I saw him nod. They had weaponized the law against me. They had severed my income stream. I couldn't work. The shop was closed. The red tag mocking me. I sat in my house, in the dark, listening to the silence. The phone rang. It was old man Jenkins at the pawn shop, 3 towns over. "Arthur," he said, his voice gravelly, "I got something here I think belongs to you." "What is it, Jenkins?" "Your son-in-law was here about an hour ago." My stomach tightened. What did he sell? Nothing. I wouldn't buy from him. He looked twitchy, but he was trying to pawn a set of antique chisels. Sheffield steel, rosewood handles. I closed my eyes. My father's chisel, the ones he had given me when I graduated engineering school. "So you never forget where the math comes from," he had said. "Did you see the initials?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Yeah, AH carved in the handles. I told him to get lost, but Arthur, if he has those, he's been in your garage. They had broken into my home. While I was at the shop arguing with the police, they had violated my sanctuary. They were stripping me bare, piece by piece. Hold them if he comes back, Jenkins, I said, and call the cops. Will do, 3 the hour of the wolf. My phone rang on the nightstand. The screen lit up the room with a harsh, artificial blue light. Eliza, I answered. I didn't say hello. Dad, please, she sobbed. It sounded off, too loud, too theatrical. It was the sound of someone performing grief, not feeling it. What is it, Eliza? They're going to take the house, she cried. Our condo. We leveraged everything against the fund. If we don't pay the buy-in by Friday, the creditors call the note. We lose it all. I'll be homeless. Your grandchildren, if I had them, they'd be on the street. You don't have children, Eliza. But I might. Dad, please. Just open the safe. I sat up in bed. The darkness of the room felt cold, empty. I looked at the picture of my late wife on the dresser. She looked so kind. She would have been heartbroken. You have a master's degree, Eliza. You can work. I'll help you find a job. I know people in the city administration, but I won't pay your gambling debts. I hate you, she screamed. The tears vanished instantly, like a switch had been flipped. The sobbing was replaced by a pure vitriolic shrieking.
I hope you die alone in that sawdust pile. I hope you have a stroke, and I'm the only one who can sign the papers to pull the plug. Do you hear me? Click. The silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a structure that had just lost a load-bearing wall. There it was.
The real Eliza, the daughter I had raised, was gone, replaced by this creature of need and venom. I lay back down, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, calculating the load, calculating the stress, and realizing that the collapse was inevitable. The only question was who would be standing in the rubble. I couldn't sleep. The silence in the house, usually a comfort, had become an accusation. The empty rooms echoed with the phantom sounds of the family I thought I had built. I drove to the shop at 3:30 a.m. I ignored the red tag Detective Harrow had slapped on the door. It flapped in the night breeze like a surrender flag. I refused to wave. I didn't turn on the main lights. I didn't want to draw attention. I navigated the familiar darkness by memory, the smell of sawdust guiding me. I stood by the bay doors, looking out at the street. A vehicle was parked across the road, under the flickering yellow of a street lamp. It wasn't the silver spaceship. It was a black SUV, an Escalade, massive and dark. The windows were tinted to an abyssal black. The engine was running. I could see the exhaust curling into the cold night air like dragon's breath. I unlocked the side door and walked out. I didn't have a weapon. I had my apron and my curiosity. I walked across the asphalt. The SUV didn't move. As I approached, the rear window rolled down 3 inches. Just enough. A smell wafted out, expensive tobacco and leather, masking the scent of ozone and gasoline. A man sat in the back. I couldn't see his face, hidden in the shadows, but I saw the glowing cherry of a cigar and a heavy gold ring on a hand resting on the doorframe. Mr. Halloway, a voice rasped. Sounded like tires on gravel, rough, heavy, and unrelenting. Who are you? I asked. I stood 5 feet away, close enough to hear, far enough to run. I'm Marcus Vane, he said. He took a drag of the cigar. I'm the reason your son-in-law is sweating through his silk sheets right now. He owes you? He owes me big. He owes me kidney big. Vane chuckled. A dry sound. He says his rich daddy-in-law is cashing out tomorrow. Says you're the golden goose. He lied, I said. There is no goose. That's what I figured. Men like Sterling. They bet on horses that are already glue. Smoke curled out of the window, drifting around my face. Here's the thing, Arthur. I run a business. High risk, high yield. If he doesn't pay by noon Friday, I have to mitigate my losses. What does that mean? It means accidents happen. To families. To pretty wives with big mouths. The threat hung in the air, heavy as humidity. You leave her out of this, I said, my fists clenching. I don't leave anyone out when my ledger is in the red. Vane said. You pay his debt, or you start shopping for black dresses. Have a good night, Arthur. The window rolled up. The SUV peeled away, disappearing into the dark. I stood alone in the cold. This wasn't just greed anymore. It was survival. Sterling hadn't just overextended himself. He had borrowed from the devil, and now the devil was parking on my street. Thursday morning broke with a gray, weeping sky. The deadline was 24 hours away. I arrived at the shop at 7 hours a.m. Miller was already there, standing outside the bay doors, his hands on his hips. He looked sick. Don't go in there, boss, Miller said, his voice thick. I walked past him. The front window of the office, the plate glass I had installed myself in 1985, was shattered. Shards of glass covered the floor, glittering like diamonds in the gloomy light. The wind blew in, scattering papers across the room. A brick lay in the center of the office floor. It was a common red brick, wrapped in a page torn from a luxury real estate magazine. I picked it up. Written in Sharpie across the glossy photo of a penthouse was a message. Stop being selfish. Cash us out, or burn it down. It wasn't Vane. Vane was professional. He used threats, not bricks. This was Sterling. This was the tantrum of a child who had found his father's gun. I swept up the glass in silence. The sound of the broom on the concrete, swish, clatter, swish, was the only sound in the room. Boss, we should call the cops, Miller said from the doorway. Harrow is a prick, but this is destruction of property. No, I said. I dumped the glass into the bin. Harrow won't help. He's already bought and paid for or scared off. This ends tomorrow. I boarded up the window with a sheet of plywood. The office became dark, lit only by the desk lamp. It felt like a bunker. It felt like a tomb. I sat in the squeaking chair. I looked at the safe. For 3 years, that money had been a comfort, a secret victory, proof that I was smarter than the world gave me credit for. But now I saw it for what it was. It wasn't a shield, it was a magnet. It was a radioactive core that was poisoning everyone who got close to it. It had turned my daughter into a monster, and my son-in-law into a criminal. As long as that money existed, as long as they knew it was there, they would never stop. They would circle like vultures. They would sue. They would harass. They would wait for me to die, or Vane would kill them, and the guilt would kill me. I needed to remove the variable. I needed to balance the equation by zeroing it out. I picked up the phone. I dialed Henderson, my attorney in the city. Henderson, I said. Arthur? I heard about the shop closing. Is everything all right? No, I need to make a change to the trust. Immediate effect. Okay. What kind of change? I need you to wire the funds. The liquid assets from the land sale. All of it. There was a pause. All of it? Arthur, are you sure? The penalties for breaking the CD. The tax implications. I don't care about the penalty. I don't care about the taxes. Do it. Today. Before noon. All right, Henderson said, his voice hesitant. Where is it going? You want to pay off the kids? I took a deep breath. I looked at the plywood covering the window. No, I said. Send half to the feline sanctuary of West Creek. The cat shelter. Henderson choked. Arthur? Eliza's allergic to cats. She hates them. I know, I said. A cold, grim smile touched my lips. And send the other half to the Tradesman Scholarship Fund at the community college. For kids who want to work with their hands. Kids who understand the value of a day's labor. Arthur, this is irrevocable. Once I send this wire, do it, Henderson. Send me the confirmation when it's done. I hung up. It was the pettiest thing I had ever done. And yet, I felt a weight lift off my chest. A structural load I hadn't realized was crushing me. I locked the office door. I turned to the safe. I knelt before it. My knees popped. I placed my ear against the cold iron door. I spun the dial. The tumblers clicked. A precise, mechanical language I understood better than English. Right to 40, click. Left to 10, click. Right to 25, click. Final turn to 0. The heavy steel bolts retracted with a solid thunk. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges. Inside, on the single metal shelf, sat the bank book and the original cashier's check receipt. The physical proof of $6 million. I took them out. I walked to the shredder in the corner. I fed the papers into the machine. The motor whined, the blades gnashed. In 10 seconds, my fortune was reduced to confetti. Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet. I opened it. I bypassed the 20s and the 10s. I pulled out a single crisp $1 bill. It was new. I'd gotten it from the bank that morning when I withdrew cash to pay Miller under the table. I looked at it under the desk lamp. George Washington looked back, stoic and unblinking. I looked at the serial number, L4829501. I closed my eyes. I memorized it. I engraved it into my mind like a chisel into stone. I went back to the safe store. I removed the back panel of the locking mechanism. It was a complex array of brass wheels and pins. I took a small screwdriver from my pocket. I reset the combination. It was tricky work. One slip, the safe would be bricked forever. But my hands were steady. I was an engineer. I understood how the gears meshed. I set the new code to match the serial number of the dollar bill, 482950. I placed the single dollar bill on the cold steel shelf inside the safe. It lay there, small and lonely in the cavernous space where millions should have been. I closed the door. I spun the dial. Clunk, locked. It was no longer a vault. It was a mausoleum. I sat back down. My hands were calm now. The trembling was gone. The wire transfer confirmation dinged on my email. It was done. The money was gone. I was poor again. I was just Arthur with a dusty shop and a broken window. I pulled out my phone. I texted Eliza, "Come to the shop. Noon. I'm done fighting." Then I waited. I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the plywood. It sounded like a mournful song. Or maybe it was a victory march. The trap was set. But unlike most traps, this one wasn't designed to catch a predator. It was designed to show the predator that there was no meat left on the bone. They arrived at 11:55 a.m. 5 minutes early. Desperation runs on a tight schedule. I heard them before I saw them. The silver sedan came screaming down the road, the engine redlining. There was no attempt to navigate the potholes this time. The car bottomed out with a sickening metallic crunch against the gravel at the entrance of the lot. But they didn't slow down. They skidded to a halt in the middle of the yard, kicking up a cloud of gray dust that drifted toward the open bay doors like a phantom. They didn't park. They abandoned the vehicle. Both doors flew open. Eliza emerged first. She looked manic. The carefully constructed facade of the wealthy socialite had dissolved. Her hair, usually lacquered into submission, was frizzy and wild, escaping its pins. Her trench coat was unbuttoned, flapping in the wind, revealing a stained blouse underneath. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in 3 days, a woman running from a fire she had started. Sterling looked worse. He stumbled as he got out, catching himself on the doorframe. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, as if he had been trying to hang himself with it. He kept checking his watch, then looking over his shoulder at the empty road, checking for the black SUV. He looked like a man walking to the gallows, who had just been told the executioner was traffic delayed. They ran toward the shop. Not walked. Ran. The gravel crunched loudly under their expensive soles. A chaotic, scrambling rhythm. I sat in my office chair, hands folded on the desk. I didn't rise. I let the silence of the room settle around me one last time. "Dad!" Eliza gasped, bursting into the office. The plywood on the window rattled with the force of her entry. "Thank God! You finally saw reason." She leaned against the doorframe, chest heaving. She tried to smile, but her facial muscles were too tight. It looked like a rictus of pain. "I saw something," I said softly. "Sit down. We don't have time to sit," Sterling shouted, pushing past her. He was vibrating with adrenaline. "The wire cutoff is at 2 hours in p.m. We need the check now. We have to get to the bank. Is it in the safe?" He looked at the iron door in the corner. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. He looked at it with a hunger that was almost sexual. "The money is handled," I said. My voice was calm, a flat line amidst their chaotic spikes. "Handled?" Eliza froze. The air left her lungs. What does that mean? Did you invest it? It means I've made a decision about my estate. About the future. She stopped breathing. I could see the panic rising in her throat. A physical lump. She was calculating the variables. Lawyers, probate, delays. None of which she could afford. Just give it to us. Eliza shrieked. It wasn't a request. It was a demand born of terror. She slammed her hands on my desk. The old oak groaned. A cloud of dust puffed up around her manicured fingers. Stop torturing us. We are your family. We deserve that money. We are the legacy. Mom would have wanted us to have it. Legacy, I repeated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I looked for the little girl who used to sit on my workbench and hand me nails. I looked for the teenager who cried when her hamster died. I couldn't find her. She had been remodeled, renovated into something cold and hollow. You think legacy is numbers in a bank account, Eliza? Legacy is what you build. Legacy is how you treat people when you don't need anything from me. Legacy is the structure that stands when the builder is gone. Spare us the sermon, old man. Sterling yelled. Sterling's eyes darted around the room. He was looking for leverage. He was looking for force. His eyes landed on the desk, on the heavy framing chisel I had used to scare them off 2 weeks ago. It was still there, sitting on a stack of invoices. He grabbed it. His hand wrapped around the rosewood handle. He pointed the beveled steel edge at my chest. Open the safe? Now. The room went deadly quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my hands. I had spent 40 years on job sites. I had faced down angry foremen, drunk laborers, and structural collapses. I knew the difference between a killer and a coward. Sterling's hand was shaking so violently the tip of the chisel was vibrating in the air. You're going to stab me, Sterling? I asked softly. In my own shop? With my father's tool? I will if I have to, he stammered. I'm not losing everything. I'm not going to jail. You're already in jail, son, I said. You built the cell yourself. Put the tool down before you hurt yourself. He looked at the chisel, then at me, then at the safe. He didn't have the guts. He was a man of soft power, of signatures and emails. Violence required a conviction he didn't possess. He lowered the chisel, but didn't drop it. He looked defeated. You want to be cashed out? I asked. My voice broke the stalemate. Yes, Eliza screamed. The sound tore at my throat. Cash me out. I am done waiting for you to die. Give me my inheritance right now. I am your daughter. Okay, I said. I reached into the pocket of my canvas apron. Sterling dropped the chisel. It clattered onto the desk, gouging the wood. His eyes went wide, filled with a sudden, desperate hope. He thought I was reaching for a key, or a checkbook, or the combination written on a slip of paper. I'm not opening the safe, I said. But I have your inheritance right here. My hand closed around the object in my pocket. I felt the paper texture. Eliza's eyes widened. She held out her hands, cupped together like a beggar. Greedy, trembling hands. Give it to me, she whispered. I pulled my hand out. I tossed a single, crumpled object onto the desk. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a key. It was a dollar bill. It wasn't the crisp one from the safe. It was just $1. A dirty, wrinkled dollar bill I had gotten as change for my coffee that morning. It had a coffee stain on the corner. It landed between them, unfolding slightly like a dying leaf. There, I said. That's it. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy, pressing against our eardrums. The dust motes stopped dancing. Eliza stared at the dollar bill. She blinked, once, twice. Her brain couldn't process the data. It was a syntax error in her reality. Her face went pale, then gray, then a violent shade of purple as the blood rushed back in a tidal wave of rage. Which is this? She whispered. Her voice was trembling so hard the words were barely intelligible. It's $1, I said. Start investing. If you're smart, you can double it. That's how I started. This is a joke, Sterling stammered. He backed away, hitting the wall. He looked like he was going to vomit. This is a sick joke. The millions, the land money, the check. Not for you, I said. Never for you. Not anymore. The realization hit them like a freight train. The walls of their expectation crumbled. The roof caved in. Eliza let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a guttural growl, born from the deepest, darkest part of the mind. She snatched the dirty dollar bill off the desk. She crumpled it in her fist, squeezing it until her knuckles were white. "You hate me," she screamed. "You've always hated me. You jealous, bitter old man." "I loved you enough to say no," I said. My heart was breaking, cracking down the center, but my face remained stone. "I loved you enough to not let you destroy yourself with my money. I loved you enough to try to teach you, even now." "You ruined us," Sterling shouted. Tears were streaming down his face now. "Do you know what they will do to me? He's gonna kill me." "I suspect I do," I said. "Maybe you should start running. You have a head start." Eliza leaned over the desk. She was shaking with a chaotic energy. She looked deranged. She uncrumpled the dollar bill. She held it flat in her palm. Then she leaned in close. Her face was inches from mine. I could smell the expensive perfume masking the scent of fear and sour sweat. She huffed up a glob of spit. Splat. She spit right on the crumpled dollar bill in her hand. A thick, foamy mass of saliva. Then she threw the wet, sticky ball of paper at my face. It hit my cheek with a wet slap. It slid down my jawline and fell to the floor. "Keep your trash," she screamed. "I hope you rot. I hope this shop burns down with you in it." I have no father. That was it. The structural failure was complete. The bond was severed. The bridge had collapsed into the river. "Come on, Eliza." Sterling grabbed her arm. He was looking at the safe with hungry, desperate eyes, but he heard something outside, a car engine slowing down. Paranoia seized him. "We'll get a drill. We'll come back with a locksmith. We'll get a court order," he babbled, pulling her away. "You'll get nothing." Eliza shrieked, fighting him, but letting him drag her. She turned at the door for one last look. Her eyes were black holes. "You are dead to me," she hissed. Sterling dragged her out. I heard the sports car roar to life. I heard the tires scream as they peeled out of the lot, throwing gravel against the side of the building like shrapnel. I was alone. I sat there for a long time. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the armies have left. I reached up and wiped the spot where the wet paper had hit my cheek. It felt cold. I felt a tear form in my eye. Just one. I let it fall. It tracked through the dust on my face, leaving a clean line. It was the last tear I would shed for them. Grief has a limit. I had reached mine. I bent down. My knees cracked in the quiet room. I picked up the dollar bill. It was stained. It was dirty. It was wet with my daughter's spit. I smoothed it out on the desk. I wiped it off with my sleeve. It was just a piece of paper, but it was also a receipt for the price of my freedom. It was the most valuable dollar I ever owned. The roar of the silver sedan faded into the distance, swallowed by the winding country roads, but the vibration remained in the room. It hummed in the wood of the desk, in the glass of the cabinets, in the marrow of my bones. I sat there for what felt like an hour, though the clock on the wall insisted only 5 minutes had passed. I looked at the dollar bill on the desk. The spit had dried, leaving a crusted, translucent stain on George Washington's face. It was a desecration, not of the money. Money is just dirty paper, but of the gesture. I had offered her a lesson, a final chance to understand that value isn't a number, and she had responded with biological warfare. I reached for a tissue and wiped the bill carefully, smoothing out the wrinkles she had crushed into it. I folded it once, sharp and precise, and placed it in my breast pocket, right over my heart. It wasn't a souvenir of love. It was a reminder of the cost of blindness. My cheek still burned where the paper wad had hit me. I didn't wipe it. I let the sensation linger, a phantom bruise to remind me that the daughter I raised was gone. She had been replaced by a hunger that wore her face. My phone buzzed on the desk. It wasn't a ring. It was a harsh, insistent vibration against the hardwood. It sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I stared at it. The screen lit up, cutting through the gloom of the boarded-up office. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it would be poison, but curiosity is a flaw in every engineer. We always need to know the extent of the damage. I picked it up. The text message was a wall of capital letters, a block of digital rage. We are going to the lawyer now. We are filing an emergency injunction. We will declare you mentally incompetent. By Monday, we will get a court order to drill that safe and we will take everything. Enjoy your last weekend in charge. You are finished. I read it twice. I looked for pain in my chest. I looked for fear. I waited for the panic of a lonely old man facing a legal machine. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, buoyant lightness. It was the feeling of a diver who has dropped his weights and is finally floating toward the surface. The threat was empty. They were threatening to siege a fortress that had already been evacuated. They were threatening to steal a treasure that was already gone. I looked at the safe in the corner. The black iron door was closed. The dial sat at 0. Inside, the shelves were bare, save for the single-dollar bill I had placed there earlier, the twin of the one in my pocket. I looked at the keypad of my phone. My fingers were thick, calloused from decades of handling oak and steel. They weren't made for tiny touchscreens, but today they moved with a steady, rhythmic precision. I hit reply. I didn't type quickly. I savored every letter. I was drafting the final modification to the blueprint. Too bad, I typed. I paused. I listened to the wind rattling the plywood. The serial number on that dollar bill you just threw at me is the combination to the safe. I let that sink in. I imagined her reading it. I imagined the gears turning in her head, grinding against the rust of her greed. But don't worry about coming back to open it. It's empty. I wired the 6 million this morning. It's gone. I took a breath. The air tasted stale but sweet. I donated the entire amount to the West Creek Cat Shelter. They're using it to build a new veterinary wing. They're naming it the Martha Halloway Memorial Wing, after your mother. She always loved strays. She would have loved to know she helped them. I hovered my thumb over the send arrow. It was a small blue circle, a pixelated button. But in that moment, it felt like the detonator to a controlled demolition. I thought about Mercy. I thought about deleting the draft, blocking the number, and letting them chase their tails for months. But mercy requires a recipient capable of receiving it. Eliza and Sterling were past that point. They needed the truth, and the truth, like concrete, is hard. I pressed the button. Swoosh. The message bubble turned blue. Delivered. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my squeaking chair. I let my imagination construct the scene, as vivid as a CAD drawing. I saw the silver car speeding down the interstate, weaving through traffic, Sterling gripping the wheel with white knuckles, sweating through his suit. I saw Eliza in the passenger seat, furiously typing on her phone, searching for lawyers, searching for leverage. I heard the ping of the notification. I saw her look down. I saw her read the words. The serial number, the dollar bill. I saw the realization hit her. Not slowly, but all at once. The memory of the crumpled paper in her hand. The feel of the texture. The serial number she hadn't bothered to look at. She had held the key. She had literally held the $6 million in her palm, and she had spit on it. She had thrown it on the floor. She had walked away from the only thing that could have saved them, because it looked like a single dollar. Because it looked small. Because her greed had blinded her to value, leaving her only able to see price. I imagined the scream. It wouldn't be the angry shriek from the office. It would be the hollow, devastating wail of someone who realizes they have murdered their own salvation. And Sterling, when she told him, when he realized he had walked away from the combination, the car would probably swerve. Maybe they would pull over. Maybe they would turn around and race back. But it wouldn't matter. The dollar in the safe was just paper now. The money was already buying antibiotics for kittens. The ledger was balanced. I opened my eyes. The room felt different. The pressure was gone. The tornado had passed, and the house was still standing. I stood up, my knees popped, but the ache was a good ache. The ache of a job finished. I walked to the window. I grabbed the claw hammer from my belt. I pried the plywood loose. The nails shrieked as they were pulled from the frame, a sound like a banshee leaving the building. I pushed the wood aside. The afternoon sun streamed in through the broken glass. It hit the dust motes in the air. Igniting them, the golden haze returned. It wasn't the dust of decay anymore. It was the dust of creation. I unlocked the office door and walked out onto the shop floor. The shop was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Miller was there. He had come back. He was standing by his bench, hand sanding a cabinet door. He wasn't working fast. He was just working. The rhythmic chef of the sandpaper was the heartbeat of the room. He looked up as I entered. He saw the red mark on my cheek. He saw the way I was standing, straighter than I had in years. He stopped sanding. He wiped his hands on his pants. "Everything okay, boss?" Miller asked. His voice was rough, worried. I saw them peel out. Sounded like they were trying to launch that car into orbit. I walked over to the table saw. I ran my hand over the cast iron surface. Cold, solid, honest. "Better than okay, Miller," I said. "The job is done. The punch list is cleared." "And the situation?" Miller asked, tilting his head toward the office. "The money trouble." "There is no money trouble," I said. "Because there is no money." Miller squinted at me. "I don't follow. I gave it back to the universe, Miller. It was termite damage waiting to happen. I cut it out before the rot spread to the beams." Miller looked at me for a long moment. He didn't ask for details. He was a craftsman. He respected the finished product without needing to see the blueprints. "Well," Miller said, picking up his sanding block, "coffee's cold, but I can make a fresh pot." "Do that?" I said. I looked around the shop. For the last 3 years, this place had felt like a front, a disguise I wore to hide the millionaire. Now it was just a shop again, and I was just Arthur. I wasn't the target of a lawsuit. I wasn't a bank. I wasn't a disappointment to a daughter who wanted a bank instead of a father. I was a carpenter. I walked to the bay doors and looked out at the empty lot. The tire tracks from the silver sedan were gouged deep into the gravel, ugly scars on the earth. I would rake them smooth tomorrow, but for now, I had a decision to make. A final adjustment to the structure of my life. I turned back to Miller. "Miller?" I said. "Yeah, boss?" "Put down the sandpaper. We need to talk about the deed." "The deed?" Miller stopped sanding. The block of wood hung in his hand, suspended in the dusty air. "What are you talking about, boss?" "I'm retiring, Miller," I said. I walked over to the coffee pot, pouring the last dregs into a styrofoam cup. "For real this time. No more coming in to check the books. No more tinkering on weekends." "Okay," Miller said slowly, his brow furrowing. "So, you're closing up? Selling the land?" He looked around the shop. I could see the panic in his eyes. He wasn't thinking about his paycheck. He was thinking about the wood. He was thinking about the unfinished cabinets, the smell of the pine, the sanctuary this place provided him from a world that didn't understand men who worked with their hands. "I'm not selling it," I said. "I gave it away." Miller's shoulders slumped. "Oh, some developer? Another server farm?" "No," I said. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. "I gave it to you." The silence that followed was different from the silence in the office. That had been a vacuum, a void caused by the absence of humanity. This silence was heavy, pregnant with shock. "Me," Miller whispered. "I signed the transfer of deed this morning," I said, leaning against the workbench. "It's in the mail. By Tuesday, you'll own the land, the building, the tools, and the client list, even the coffee pot." "Arthur, Miller stammered. He looked at his hands, big, scarred, stained with walnut varnish. "I can't pay you for this. I don't have that kind of capital." "It's not a sale, Miller. It's a gift." "Why?" he asked. His voice cracked. "That son-in-law of yours, he said this place was worth a fortune in scrap alone." "Because you know the difference between grain and rot," I said. "Because you stayed when the police put a red tag on the door. Because you're the son I never had, and the craftsman this town needs." I reached out and patted his shoulder. He was trembling, a subtle vibration like a generator humming under load. "Finish that cabinet," I said. And keep the coffee fresh. Don't let it turn into sludge like I do. Miller didn't speak. He couldn't. He just nodded, tears cutting tracks through the sawdust on his face. He gripped the sanding block like a lifeline. He was the load-bearing wall now. The structure was safe. I walked out of the shop and into the bright, blinding afternoon. The air smelled of ozone and wet asphalt. The aftermath of the storm, both the literal one that had passed and the metaphorical one I had just survived. I walked toward my truck. It was a 1998 Chevy rusted around the wheel wells with an engine that ticked like a metronome. It was honest. I opened the door. The hinge creaked, a familiar, comforting sound. I looked into the truck bed. My old fishing pole was there, buried under a tarp, entangled with some jumper cables. It hadn't seen water in 10 years. I climbed into the cab. I sat there for a moment, looking at the shop. I saw the Holloway Woodworks sign swinging gently in the breeze. I imagined Miller inside, staring at the walls, realizing that he was no longer a tenant in his own life. I didn't have $6 million anymore. I didn't have a daughter who spoke to me. I didn't have a legacy of skyscrapers or trust funds. But I checked my pulse. It was slow, steady. The frantic rhythm of the last 2 weeks was gone. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, coughing, a cloud of blue smoke. I put it in gear and pulled out of the lot. I didn't look back at the tire tracks. Eliza had left. I looked forward, toward the winding road that led to the lake. I had the sun on my face. I had a clear conscience. And in my breast pocket, right over my heart, I had a single, spit-stained dollar bill. It was enough. Time is the ultimate auditor. It eventually balances every account, exposing every fraudulent entry. Months passed. The leaves turned from green to gold to brown, and the snow came to West Creek. News travels fast in Upteen, other towns, even if you stop going to the diner. I heard about Sterling first. The Apex Horizon Fund collapsed 3 days after they left my shop. It turned out Vane wasn't the only one Sterling owed. When the liquidity didn't materialize, the house of cards imploded. He didn't go to jail immediately. First, he went to the hospital, a carjacking incident. The police report said, broken ribs, shattered kneecaps, Vane's method of collecting interest. When he got out of the hospital, the feds were waiting. Wire fraud, embezzlement, Ponzi schemes. He's currently serving 8 years in a federal facility 2 states over. I suspect he's not enjoying the accommodations. In Eliza, the condo was foreclosed. The silver car was repossessed. She moved to the city, but not to a penthouse. A friend of mine saw her recently. She's working in a high-end boutique in the fashion district. She's not the manager. She's a sales associate. She spends her days folding clothes for women she used to lunch with, fetching sizes for the very people she used to look down on. I heard she tells people her father died. In a way, she's right. The father she wanted. The banker, the ATM, the enabler is dead. She never came back for the safe. She never tried to drill it. The knowledge that she had held the key and thrown it away must haunt her. It is a ghost she will carry for the rest of her life. Me, I'm just Arthur. I fish on Tuesdays. I catch mostly bass, sometimes a trout. I throw them all back. I don't need to keep things anymore. On Thursdays, I drive down to the West Creek Animal Shelter. The construction took 6 months. It's a beautiful structure. Miller did the framing. He insisted on doing it at cost. It's solid. It will stand for 100 years. I walk through the glass doors of the Martha Holloway Veterinary Wing. It smells of antiseptic and hope. There is a bronze plaque by the door. It has my wife's name on it. It doesn't mention the millions. It just says, for the strays who need a home. I sit in the cat room for an hour. I watch the kittens climbing the towers, sleeping in the sunbeams. Yesterday, a small calico climbed into my lap. She purred, a vibrating motor of pure contentment. She didn't know I was poor. She didn't know I was alone. She just knew I was warm. I stroked her fur and I thought about the nature of wealth. I thought about the stress calculations I used to do. Sum of forces equals 0. That is the condition for equilibrium. That is the condition for a structure to stand. For 40 years, I was out of balance. I was hoarding, hiding, carrying a load that was too heavy for the foundation. Now the load is gone. The moment is zero. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the dollar bill. I keep it in a plastic sleeve now. I looked at George Washington. I looked at the faint yellowed stain of my daughter's spit. I smiled. I put the dollar back in my pocket, gently moved the kitten off my lap, and stood up to go home. The ledger was balanced. Thanks for listening to this story. If you believe that karma always collects its debts, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done with the dollar? See you in the next one.